Tonight, saving the world. Leaders from all over the globe come to Washington with one goal: keeping terrorists from getting their hands on nuclear weapons. I'm Couric in Washington. Also tonight, an exclusive interview with the President of France about another nuclear issue. How concerned are you, Mr. President, about a potential Israeli military strike against an Iranian nuclear facility? They're not waiting for the Vatican. What some American churches are doing to protect children from sexual abuse. And a few good men in need of a few good families in Steve Hartman's Assignment America.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie.
Also tonight, an exclusive interview with the President of France about another nuclear issue. How concerned are you, Mr. President, about a potential Israeli military strike against an Iranian nuclear facility? They're not waiting for the Vatican. What some American churches are doing to protect children from sexual abuse. And a few good men in need of a few good families in Steve Hartman's Assignment America.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric reporting tonight from Washington.
Good evening, everyone. It is the largest gathering of world leaders the United States has hosted in 65 years. Dozens of presidents and prime ministers from every corner of the earth have come here to Washington to deal with what they all see as the greatest threat to their people: nuclear weapons or the material used to make them falling into the hands of terrorists. It hasn't happened yet, and they're trying to come up with a plan to make sure it doesn't. Chip Reed is at the White House tonight, and Chip, the president has certainly elevated this issue.
Well, Katie, the president says the single biggest threat to U.S. security is the possibility that a terrorist group would get its hands on a nuclear weapon. The goal of this summit is to try to make sure that never happens.
The president welcomed leaders from 46 nations to a summit that will confront one of the gravest threats to global security. There are an estimated 3.5 million pounds of loose nuclear material spread over at least 40 nations at military installations, nuclear reactors, and research universities, enough to make about 120,000 nuclear bombs. Groups like Al-Qaeda are aggressively trying to obtain the materials and would not hesitate to use them, according to the president's top terrorism advisor.
We cannot wait any longer before we lock down these stockpiles, because we don't want to have any type of materials that fall into the hands of terrorist groups, because the results will be devastating.
To get the summit off on a positive note, it was recently announced that all of Chile's highly enriched uranium has been shipped to the United States.
And more positive news today, the United States announced that Ukraine is sending all of its nuclear material out of the country, either to the U.S. or to Russia, for safe storage. Katie?
And Chip, how quickly will these safeguards be put in place?
Well, President Obama says he wants them in place within 4 years. He's confident they'll have a plan for doing that when they leave this summit. Some analysts say that's doable. Others say you will never know for sure if it's all accounted for.
And is Iran on the agenda at all here?
Well, not formally, but in side meetings, very much so. The president met with President Hu of China a short time ago. And although China is not yet on board for sanctions against Iran, they are moving in that direction, according to the White House. Now, China, of course, is key here because they have a veto on the Security Council, and also they've been reluctant so far because they get so much of their oil from Iran. Katie?
All right, Chip Reid at the White House tonight. Chip, thanks very much. And as Chip just mentioned, the White House said China is now ready to discuss new economic sanctions against Iran. But Elizabeth Palmer in Tehran reports, sanctions or not, the Iranians have no intention of stopping their nuclear program.
Only in Iran does uranium enrichment rate this kind of pomp. On National Nuclear Day, President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad told the country it should feel proud. While President Ahmadinejad urges Iranians to celebrate their country's nuclear program, the rest of the world is coming together under U.S. leadership to condemn it and to press for tough new sanctions against Iran. For example, harsh restrictions on Iranian banking and shipping. The head of the country's nuclear agency, Ali Akbar Salehi, who got his Ph.D. at MIT, made a candid admission in a rare interview with CBS News.
Of course, sanctions will affect us, but it only will delay our projects. It will not stop our projects.
They hurt.
Of course, they will hurt, but then we will have to come up with our own manufacturing systems.
Iran already enriches uranium in one plant, and recently it announced it would build 6 more. It says it just wants fuel for nuclear power stations, but the U.S. suspects it secretly plans to build a bomb. Are you trying to make any kind of weapon?
No. We have indicated this many times, not me, our president, our supreme leader. This is against our tenets, it's against our religion.
The U.S. and its allies might have more faith in that argument if Iran didn't do things like this. Publicly unveil a new centrifuge that would enrich more uranium even faster. Or say things like this.
Any military encounter with Iran will create consequences that are beyond anybody's imagination.
Like?
It can put the entire region on fire.
All tactics that erode Western confidence in Iran, but please the crowds at home. Elizabeth Palmer, CBS News, Tehran.
One of the leaders at the summit here is President Nicolas Sarkozy of France. It's his second trip to Washington in 2 weeks. In an exclusive interview earlier today, we discussed a potential international response to Iran's nuclear ambitions. You have very passionately advocated stronger sanctions against Iran. What exactly do you mean by stronger sanctions, and to what end?
I consider that the fact that Iran should get its hands on a nuclear weapon, a military nuclear weapon, together with the many statements made by Iranian leaders against the democracy that is Israel, is dangerous and unacceptable. Unacceptable, quite simply. Now, President Obama had wanted to stretch out his hand in order to show clearly to the Iranians that it was not they who were the target, but their leadership. Patience has its limits, and we have come to a time now where we need to vote sanctions, not against the Iranian people, but against the leaders who are leading the country to the wall.
Are you optimistic you'll be able to do that within the purview of the UN Security Council, or do you believe that they'll significantly weaken the sanctions so they're not effective?
I'm a realist. I'm down to earth. The best solution is the unity of the Security Council, but not at any price. Not at the price of a resolution that is so toothless that it would achieve nothing.
How concerned are you, Mr. President, about a potential Israeli military strike against an Iranian nuclear facility?
That would be disastrous. It would be a disaster. I don't even want to think it were possible. And the best way to avoid this disaster scenario is to take measures in order to get Israel to understand that we are determined to ensure its security, and Israel, furthermore, must equally make the necessary efforts in order to bring about a fair and lasting peace with their Palestinian neighbors.
Not now, but down the road, maybe in many years, can you conceive of a nuclear-free world?
Well, in a virtual world where there would be no nuclear weapons, I think everyone would applaud that fact. But I cannot jeopardize the security and safety of my country. You have to realize we're a country of 65 million inhabitants. We have fewer conventional weapons than the US, than Russia, than China, for that matter. Now, I have inherited the legacy of the efforts made by my predecessors to build up France as a nuclear power. And I could not give up nuclear weapons insofar as I wasn't sure that the world was a stable and safe place.
But do you think it's a realistic goal?
It's a dream, and often dreams can turn into reality. But I will not give up that nuclear weapon because it underpins my country's security. I will not do so on a unilateral basis in a world as dangerous as the one in which we live in today.
Finally, the president acknowledged his personal life is always under the microscope. It must get slightly annoying.
Madame, if you don't want to be annoyed, then you have to choose another job than my job. Having said that, it's a wonderful job. It's part of modern life. It's part of the system. That's the way it is. It's not really worth wasting one's time on or one's breath on. In any case, there's nothing much we can do about it, so we try and deal with it as calmly as possible.
Monsieur President, merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You speak French very friendly.
Hardly. In other news, 1 week after the explosion at a West Virginia coal mine, the last of the bodies are now being recovered. Now the focus is shifting to how the disaster happened and who might be to blame. Jim Axelrod is in Charleston, West Virginia.
At a memorial this afternoon, West Virginia's governor tried to soothe the spirits broken by the nation's deadliest mining disaster in 40 years.
When someone you love becomes a memory, the memory becomes a treasure. We have 29 treasures. 29 treasures.
An army of pastors has been busy at church services and funerals across the state since Saturday morning, when West Virginia's worst fears were confirmed and the last 4 missing miners were found dead.
We did not receive the miracle that we prayed for.
It turns out rescue workers had walked right past 3 of the 4 missing miners' bodies in their very first trip into the mine, right after the explosion a week ago.
There was so much smoke and the conditions were so dire at that time with dust in the air that they apparently bypassed the 3 bodies that were on the ground.
The U.S. Attorney for West Virginia today announced his office stands ready, willing, and able to pursue any criminal violations that a federal investigation may turn up. The probe by federal mining investigators will focus on a methane explosion as the suspected cause. Massey Energy was cited 38 times for ventilation violations at the Upper Big Branch mine in 2009 alone, a sign the mine's owner was failing to remove dangerous gases. The mine racked up 7 more ventilation violations just in the month leading up to this latest catastrophe.
That's a red flag, and it shows that it's a troubled mine. It's a mine that does not have a commitment to safety. There's no other way to explain it.
State mining officials tell CBS News they expect all 29 miners' bodies will have been removed from the mine by midnight. Katie?
Jim Axelrod in Charleston, West Virginia. Jim, thank you. And coming up next here on the CBS Evening News, what the Catholic Church here in Washington is doing to protect children from becoming victims of sexual abuse. It is just what the Vatican didn't need, more controversy. But today, the number 2 official there stirred some up when he suggested homosexuality, not celibacy, is to blame for priests abusing children. He said experts believe, quote, there is a relation between homosexuality and pedophilia, end quote. Meanwhile, the Vatican for the first time directed church officials to report sex abuse to the police. And here in this country, Elaine Quijano reports some churches are taking action of their own to protect children.
Mark Serrano remembers the first time he was alone with his abuser, Father Jim Hanley. Serrano was a 4th grader at St. Joseph's in Mendham, New Jersey, and just 9 years old.
Father Hanley was friendly, put his arm around me, and just said, I hear you've been acting up in class. And, you know, you got to stop giving the nuns a hard time. You know, tell you what, why don't you come and see me at the rectory?
A gregarious priest, Hanley worked slowly to gain Serrano's trust and the trust of Serrano's parents, Pat and Lou.
In individual visits, Father Jim would sit me on his lap, he would pull out the Hustler magazine, and he would give me basically a sex education course.
The molestation escalated to sexual acts, which he kept secret from his parents. He escaped the abuse at age 14 when he graduated from St. Joseph's.
I was no match for a cunning predator. That's what he was.
The Catholic Church has struggled to come to grips with abuse cases like Mark Serrano's, but U.S. church officials insist they are learning from past mistakes and have implemented abuse awareness programs and more rigorous screening measures.
It's probably the worst thing to think that a child was abused.
The Archdiocese of Washington, which has seen 22 abuse cases involving priests in the last 60 years, is tackling the problem on multiple fronts.
This is video 2, a plan to protect God's children.
Everyone from priests to secretaries and church volunteers are required to attend a 3-hour sex abuse awareness program. It details the warning signs of abuse, like a sudden change in a child's behavior. It also explains how child predators target their victims.
Starting with your left hand.
And they must submit to criminal background checks through an electronic fingerprinting process, which is matched against the FBI's national database. And the program reaches into schools as well to teach children how to recognize and respond to inappropriate behavior.
Tell someone, tell the civil authorities, make sure a kid's safe. And that's pretty much the bottom line.
But there were no protections for Mark Serrano in the 1970s. He tried reporting the abuse to church officials and state authorities, but Hanley remained a priest. Later, he admitted to abusing Serrano and 11 other boys and was defrocked.
Do you think you could ever return to the church?
As soon as the structure is changed, as soon as bishops are held accountable for enabling sex offenders to molest and rape children, and I don't believe that will take place in my lifetime or my children's lifetime, unfortunately.
His faith in Catholicism now shattered, a deep-seated pain the church is trying to both heal and prevent. Elaine Quijano, CBS News, Lansdowne, Virginia.
It is the Oscar of journalism. The Washington Post won 4 Pulitzer Prizes today, including one for its Iraq coverage. The New York Times, meanwhile, took 2 and also won in collaboration with ProPublica, the first online service to earn a Pulitzer. They reported on the life and death decisions made by doctors following Hurricane Katrina. One more Pulitzer of note, the late Hank Williams Sr. was cited for lifetime achievement in country music. A funny thing happened to former Tonight Show host Conan O'Brien on his way to Fox. He signed instead with TBS. That surprise move means pushing George Lopez to midnight. Hey, isn't that how all of this started? Noting that he's gone from network TV to Twitter and now to basic cable, O'Brien said, quote, "My plan is working perfectly." Hawaiian Airlines may not be perfect, but it is pretty darn good. Once again, it landed atop the annual list of best airlines, followed by AirTran and JetBlue. Overall, the industry saw improvements in customer complaints, on-time performance, and mishandled luggage. But more people were bumped from flights, perhaps because cutbacks have meant fewer planes. By the way, American Eagle came in last. And still ahead, a do-it-yourself family, some assembly required. Steve Hartman's Assignment America next. We end tonight with an average American household, though the only thing average about it is the size. 3 people. Beyond that, it's very special, as Steve Hartman shows us in tonight's Assignment America.
Just outside Tampa, Florida, I found the story of an odd couple. A wonderful, inspiring odd couple. The house actually belongs to a sweetheart of a man named Rick Hetty. Rick is a foster parent of sorts. His foster kid just happens to be 81, and gruff as all get out. What did you do in the Marine Corps?
Kill people.
Oh, that's okay. But you survived to live another day.
To kill again.
Yeah. Well, you're a lovely, lovely man.
Oh, bullshit.
He's actually pretty wonderful once you get to know him. Charles Dowling served in Korea and Vietnam. Later became a drill sergeant, putting in close to 30 years with the Marines.
You okay?
Until recently, he was living in a nursing home, destined for hospice.
Better?
But then this total stranger came forward and offered to take him in.
Okay, you're done. Get some sleep.
I'm not going to let our veterans be forgotten.
That's a belief shared by all these people who are part of a new Veterans Affairs program called the Medical Foster Home Program. It pairs vets who would otherwise be in a nursing home with civilians who are willing to take them into their homes instead.
It takes a special caregiver who's really able to open their homes, to open their hearts to the needs of the veterans, and it's not easy.
Bo Williams is with the VA. He says medical foster homes are now in 34 states and within a few years could be in all 50, partly because, whereas a nursing home averages about $6,000 a month, this only costs about half that. Most of the money goes to the caregivers, like Rick, who gave up his job as a sales manager to do this.
All right. Not only is it cost effective, but more importantly, the veterans feel like they're a part of a family. They receive love.
As for what the caregiver gets out of it, let's just say Rick has found the experience so rewarding.
How you doing, Clayton?
He recently welcomed a second veteran.
It's helped me vastly in recovery.
Clayton Smith was in the Air Force when he got hit by a truck and suffered a brain injury. They were going to put him in a nursing home too, until Rick stepped up.
Rick is A-okay.
Oh, he's okay.
That's glowing praise from a drill sergeant, and more than enough reward for Rick.
This is what I'll do until the day I retire.
Good for him.
It's that good. It's better than that good.
Good for America. Steve Hartman, CBS News, Tampa.
The kindness of strangers. And if you would like to open your home to a veteran, we've posted information on our website at cbsnews.com. And that is the CBS Evening News for tonight. With thanks to the Jones Day Law Firm for this beautiful view of the Capitol, I'm Katie Couric in Washington. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow from New York. Good night.